The Wall and the Bird. My name is Annika. I was born in a small village somewhere in the wide, flat fields of Mecklenburg. The land here is quiet, just like the people. We watch the seasons come and go, and for the longest time I thought that was all there ever would be. But lately something has shifted. On the village square they talk in hushed voices about change. My parents tell me to be careful, to hold my tongue, to keep my head down. They have seen too many people disappear behind prison walls just for dreaming out loud. And yet I cannot stop dreaming. Every morning when I look out the window, I see the same grey road stretching west, disappearing into a line of birch trees. Beyond those trees, beyond the wire and the border, there is a world I have never seen. A world where you could go wherever you wished. I want to taste that world. At night, when the lamps go out and the house falls silent, I lie awake and imagine crossing the border. I try to picture what freedom feels like, whether it has a smell or a colour, or if it is only a lightness in your chest that makes you want to sing. The newspapers are starting to slip up. Sometimes they mention protests, the walls shaking, cracks in the words of our leaders. It sounds dangerous, but I do not feel afraid. I feel awake, more than ever before. I think, no, I know I will go. I wake before dawn, listening to the quiet of our old farmhouse. My parents sleep down the hall and their breathing is steady, calm. Outside, the wind moves across the fields in a gentle rhythm, like the sea. I have always loved that sound. It reminds me that there is movement, even here. I slip out of bed and dress quickly. There is no reason to get up so early except that I cannot stand lying still anymore. I need to move, to plan, to dream with my feet on the ground. Downstairs, I warm some leftover coffee and stare out into the yard. The chickens pick at the frozen earth, same as every morning. Life goes on, even when something inside you begins to burn. Yesterday, I asked my father again about the West. He closed his eyes, and for a moment I saw a look on his face I could not name. Sorrow, maybe, or regret. Then he told me the same thing as always. Forget it, Annika. There is nothing for you over there. You belong here. But I don't belong here anymore. That certainty grows in me every hour. They say you can apply for an exit visa, but it is risky. Sometimes you lose your job. Sometimes the Stasi starts watching you. Sometimes you simply vanish. I know all this, but the thought of staying is worse than any risk. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe I am ungrateful. But freedom is worth everything to me. Today, I walked to the district office, a grey building with peeling paint and hollow-eyed clerks behind heavy desks. My hands were sweating so badly I could barely hold my papers. The application for an exit visa felt heavier than a stone in my bag. I stood in line for over an hour. The people around me avoided looking at one another. We all knew what it meant to stand here, to admit in public that we wanted to leave, that we no longer believed in the slogans painted on every school wall. When my turn came, the clerk took my form without smiling. He asked me where I wanted to go. I told him, West Germany. His eyebrows twitched just slightly, and he stamped the paper without a word. My heart was beating so fast I thought I might faint. Leaving the office, I felt both weightless and terrified. This was real now. They had my name. They knew my dream. There was no going back. I took the long way home through the fields, letting the cold air clear my thoughts. In the distance, I saw a neighbour working on a tractor. He waved. I waved back, but I wondered if he would still greet me once the rumours started. Because soon everyone would know. The days after I filed the application felt strange, as if the whole village was holding its breath. Whispers followed me through the bakery, the post office, even the church. People tried to be polite, but I could see the questions in their eyes. Was I a traitor? Was I brave? Or just a fool? My mother avoided the topic entirely. She went about her chores as if nothing had happened, but her hands shook when she washed the dishes. My father barely spoke to me. At night, I heard them arguing in hushed voices, trying to keep me from hearing. But I heard every word. What if they come for her? What if she ruins her life? They were afraid for me. I understood that, but I could not let their fear chain me down. In the evenings, I took long walks through the fields. Sometimes a boy from the neighbouring farm joined me, Paul. He was a quiet soul, with gentle eyes and hands calloused from work. We had known each other since childhood. One evening, as we watched the sun slip behind the trees, he spoke. "If you go, Annika, you might never come back." "I know," I answered. He looked at me for a long time, then took my hand. There was something comforting in his warmth and something unbearably sad. "I'll miss you," he whispered. And in that moment, I almost doubted everything. I kept seeing Paul after that evening. We didn't talk much about my plans anymore. Maybe it was too painful for both of us. Instead, we spoke of simpler things: the harvest, the animals, the way the air smelled before the first snow. Sometimes just being with him made me question if leaving was worth the loss. But then I would remember the border, the fences, the rules that told me where I could and could not go. And my longing would return, sharper than before. A letter arrived one morning, folded neatly with a government seal. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words were brief, cold, final. "Your application is under review. Do not leave your place of residence until further notice." That was it. No date, no explanation, no promise. My mother tried to convince me to withdraw the request. "They will watch you now, Annika. They will make life hard for you." But I could not withdraw. I could not pretend the hunger for freedom would vanish if I just closed my eyes. In the village, people began to avoid me. Friends turned away when they saw me in the street. Only Paul stayed. And even he seemed unsure, like a man who wanted to hold on but already felt me slipping through his fingers. At night, I dreamed of wide roads, border guards stepping aside, gates opening. In those dreams, I could breathe. Rumours started spreading like wildfire. Some said the borders would open any day now. Others called it dangerous talk, a trap, a fantasy. No one knew what to believe. I listened to the radio late at night, hiding under my blanket so my parents wouldn't hear. Voices from the West spoke of protests in Leipzig, of thousands on the streets, of chants for freedom. I could barely imagine crowds so large, so fearless. Every word made my heart race. Paul came to see me one afternoon, mud on his boots and worry in his eyes. "Annika, people are saying the wall might fall. What if you wait?" "Wait for what?" I asked. "Wait to see what happens. Maybe you won't have to run away." Part of me wanted to believe him, that maybe everything could change without risk, without sacrifice. But another part of me refused to trust promises. I had lived with broken promises my whole life. "I can't just wait, Paul. I need to be ready." He nodded, but I could see how deeply it hurt him. That night I lay awake again, listening to the distant hum of trucks on the village road. Were they carrying soldiers? Food? Answers? I could not tell. All I knew was that something was coming. The air in our village felt electric. Every conversation carried a note of tension, like a string pulled too tight. People looked around before they spoke, afraid to trust even their neighbours. But change was creeping closer. One evening, the local party official came to our door. His coat was stiff with cold, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He asked for me by name. My parents stood behind me, silent, afraid. "You have applied to leave the GDR," he said flatly. I nodded, heart pounding. "Think carefully, Annika. Think of your family. Think of your duty." I swallowed hard. "I have thought about it," I told him. He stared at me for a long moment, then handed me a slip of paper and left without another word. On the paper were only 2 lines. "Report to the district office next Monday. Decision pending." I could barely breathe. That night, Paul came to me again. He was shaking. You should stay. Please, Annika. If they're calling you in, it could be dangerous. I can't turn back now. Tears welled in his eyes, and he held me so tightly I could feel the beat of his heart through his coat. For a second, I wanted to give up everything just to stay in his arms. But I couldn't. My freedom was calling, and I had no choice but to answer. The weekend before my appointment felt endless. Every minute seemed to crawl, thick with dread and expectation. My parents tried to act normal, setting the table, feeding the chickens, patching clothes. But their movements were stiff, like dolls wound too tight. On Sunday, I went for a walk, alone. I needed to clear my head, to remind myself why I had chosen this path. The fields were quiet, dusted with the first frost of winter. The wind bit at my cheeks, sharp and honest. Out here I could breathe. Out here there were no walls, no watchtowers, no men with lists and questions. I sat down under an old oak tree, the same place where Paul and I used to play as children. Memories flooded me, of running through the grass, of climbing branches until the sky felt close enough to touch. Back then, freedom was just a game. Now it was everything. I closed my eyes and let the cold sink into my bones. Maybe Paul was right. Maybe the world would change on its own if I just waited. But I couldn't trust that. I couldn't trust anyone to grant me freedom except myself. When I finally stood up to go home, I felt calm, stronger, ready. Whatever waited for me at the district office, I would face it. Monday came with a grey sky and a thin drizzle that clung to my hair. I dressed carefully, as if I could shield myself with clean clothes and calm hands. My mother kissed my cheek before I left. She tried to smile, but her eyes were swollen from crying. At the district office, the hallway smelled of wet coats and stale paper. I waited on a hard wooden bench, listening to the echo of footsteps behind heavy doors. Finally, they called my name. The man who questioned me wore a brown suit that looked 2 sizes too big. His face was tired, lined, almost kind. But not quite. He asked me about my family, my education, my reasons for wanting to leave. I answered as steadily as I could. Every word tasted like fear. You understand, he said slowly, that this is a serious request. It will change your life. It may cost you everything. I understand. He studied me for a long moment, tapping his pen against the file. We will contact you with our decision. Then he stood up, and it was over. I stepped back into the grey morning, dizzy with relief and terror. The world looked exactly the same, puddles in the street, the smell of coal smoke. But I was different. I had spoken my truth, and now there was no way to hide from it. Days passed in a blur. Every knock on the door made my heart jump. Every letter in the mailbox felt like it might decide my future. The village was changing too. More and more people spoke openly about leaving, about marching in Leipzig or Berlin, about the walls trembling. Something was breaking loose, something bigger than any of us. Paul came by almost every evening. We would sit in silence sometimes, the words too heavy to share. Other times he would try to make me laugh, telling stories about the animals or the neighbours. I could see how much he wanted me to stay. One night he reached for my hand. If they refuse you, he whispered, promise you won't do anything crazy. What do you mean? I mean, crossing the border alone. It's too dangerous, Annika. I couldn't promise him. I looked away and he knew my answer without hearing it. He sighed, pulled me close, and rested his forehead against mine. I wish things were different. Me too. For a moment it felt like the world paused around us, holding its breath. I wished I could stay in that moment forever, safe and warm, but freedom kept calling me, louder than love, louder than fear. News came by radio that night. People were pouring through the border crossings in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Whole families were leaving, running for their chance. My father sat at the kitchen table staring at the radio as if it might explode. They can't hold this back much longer, he said, voice low. My mother crossed herself, even though she barely believed in God anymore. I felt a spark inside me, bright and dangerous. If the borders were opening elsewhere, then ours might fall too. The iron fences, the walls, the men with guns, maybe they would all collapse under the weight of so many dreams. That night, I barely slept. Visions spun through my mind, trains rushing west, strangers cheering, children seeing a world without a border for the first time. I was ready to leave at a moment's notice. My small bag was packed and hidden under the bed. Documents, a little money, photographs. Enough to start again. Paul came to the door before sunrise. His face was pale. They're saying people are breaking through the Berlin Wall. My breath caught. Are you sure? My uncle called from the city. He saw it himself. It felt like the ground shifted beneath me. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was here. By the afternoon, the whole village was buzzing. Radios crackled with the same unbelievable news. The checkpoints were opening, people crossing without permission, guards standing aside. My mother wept, clutching my hand so tightly it hurt. Maybe you won't have to leave now, she said. But I didn't know how to answer her. Because deep down, I still felt that I needed to go. Not just to visit, not just to look around, but to build a life where I could speak, think, dream without permission. Paul walked with me to the road, where people gathered in small groups, uncertain whether to believe what they'd heard. The wind smelled of winter and coal smoke, of endings and beginnings. Will you go now? Paul asked quietly. I nodded. I have to see it with my own eyes. He slipped something into my pocket, a small wooden carving, a bird with spread wings. So you remember, he said, his voice breaking. I'll remember. Then I stepped away from him, away from the village, toward the bus that would take me to the border. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, the way ahead was open. The bus was crowded, packed with people who looked as stunned as I felt. Some were crying, some laughing, most just silent, eyes wide with something like disbelief. I found a place near the window and watched the familiar fields slip by. The grey barns, the crooked fences, the frozen ditches, everything I had known my whole life, passing like a slow farewell. An old woman next to me clutched a shopping bag to her chest. She turned to me and whispered, Do you think they will really let us through? I don't know, I admitted, but we have to try. She nodded and we rode on in silence. At a checkpoint outside the city, soldiers were standing by the roadside. They looked tired, their faces pale and unshaven. One of them waved the bus on, barely even checking documents. It felt unreal, like a dream that might vanish if I blinked. When we crossed into Berlin, people were streaming through the streets, waving flags, hugging strangers. Someone was singing, someone was shouting, we are free, we are free. Tears burned in my eyes. I stepped off the bus and breathed in the cold city air, sharp and bright and new. For the first time, no one stopped me. No one asked me where I was going or why. I was free to walk wherever I wanted. I moved with the crowd, carried along like a leaf in a river. People were climbing on the wall, hammering at the concrete, pulling down pieces like trophies. I could hardly believe it was real. I ran my fingers over the rough surface of the wall, cold, cracked, stained with decades of fear. This barrier had ruled our lives, told us who we were allowed to be, and now it was dying under our hands. A man handed me a hammer. I hesitated. Then I struck. Once, twice, the sound echoing through my bones. Chips of grey stone fell away. Each blow felt like breaking a chain. Paul's little wooden bird was still in my pocket, and I thought of him, of my parents, of everyone back home. Maybe they would come too someday. Maybe they would see what I saw now. Someone nearby was laughing, tears streaming down their face. Another person was singing a freedom song I'd only ever heard in secret. I stood there until my arms ached, breathing the air of a world that had just been born. I didn't know what would come next, where I would live, how I would survive, who I would become. But I was free, and for tonight, that was enough. As night fell over the city, the wall was still crumbling. Fires burned in barrels, keeping people warm while they cheered and shared bread and coffee with strangers. I found a quiet spot on the edge of the crowd, leaning against a lamppost, watching the impossible unfold. I thought of my village, of the kitchen table where my parents still sat, maybe listening to the radio in stunned silence. I thought of Paul, standing in the fields, wondering if he'd ever see me again. The future was wide open, and that was terrifying. There would be no rules to follow, no one to tell me who to be, only myself. I took the little wooden bird from my pocket and held it in my hand. Freedom felt like that, fragile, small, but strong enough to fly. A woman next to me asked where I would go now. I shook my head. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'll find out. And with that, I stepped away from the wall into the streets of a city I had only ever seen in dreams. Tomorrow I would start again.